We're really glad that you came today. This is the first time we've offered a tax workshop after many, many requests, so we're really glad to have a panel of experts here today. I will introduce them in just a moment. Just a second about my office, Graduate Student Affairs. I'm not sure if you've interfaced with us or not during your graduate student career. We're located in the administration building. We're a central office that serves all graduate students, all 10,000 of you. In a variety of ways. We provide academic support through resources like dissertation write-ins and fellowship advising. We also provide some professional development resources along with our partners CAPS. We sponsor programs like the GraduCon Professional Development Conference and then an upcoming conference that we're running in April on the 27th about teaching in liberal arts colleges. So mark your calendars for that. We also provide community building support among all students in the graduate community. To that end, we run orientation, some of the mixers and socials, and we also have the Family Resource Center for any of you who might have children or who might be considering having children during your time. It's a great resource. So we encourage you to check out all of our resources online. But today we're here to talk about taxes. And we have some great colleagues from across the university from financial services. We have Angela Gleehorn, along with Anthony Bellarmino and their colleague Jim Hamaguchi. From the Bursar's office, we've got Mike Kachelko, who's the University Bursar, and Norma Carmona, who's in the Student Loan Administration office. And then from the local academic units, we've got Melinda Swanson from the Dean of Students Office in Humanities. I think the format here is we'll just have the presentation going and then there'll be time for questions in the end. We also have an FAQ sheet that we'll hope you can take home with you on the back table here. So we'll take it away, panelists.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start. I just want to make sure that everyone understands from the beginning that this is just kind of a summary, kind of maybe the process of how to tax file and how to identify the types of payments that you're getting. We're not able to give personal tax advice. No one on this panel is able to give any kind of assistance with the tax filing. So if you have specific personal questions, we're not going to be able to answer those, but we should be able to get you on the right path to filing properly. So, and if you have any questions, I guess we'll hold them for the end, just to kind of make things go a little smoother. Okay, first, I just wanted to mention a couple future tax workshops. One is kind of focused for domestic students, but we're going to have some special shops for research scholars, foreign, today, actually this afternoon, and then on March 2nd, and then we're going to have one for foreign students, and then we're going to have kind of an informal coffee hour. So if one of these would better fit your situation, you're welcome to attend another one and welcome to stay for this. So, okay. How it's set up is we have these 6 questions, and to kind of move forward properly, we're going to have to make sure we answer each question. If you don't know the answer to the question, you're not really going to be able to move on and to properly file your taxes. So we have this list of questions to go ahead and to start the process. So, okay. Okay, so the first question is, what type of income did I have? And there's basically 4 types that would apply in the student situation. The first one is pay for services performed, which is wage. So if you're working, if you're being paid for services, this is that category, and you're going to receive a W-2 for that. And then we have self-employment income, similar to the employee-employer relationship, but it's on an independent basis. So these are your people who own their own business, consulting, contracting, something like that. That could possibly happen in this case. And then we have investment income. Obviously the most popular one would be the bank interest, but that still is considered to be reportable income. But kind of the main thing we're talking about here is certain scholarships and fellowships, and this is the one that most people are going to be interested in. It is considered to be taxable income, so it falls under one of those 4 categories. And then I know there's a lot of information on this slide, but we wanted everyone to be able to come back and reference it. If you're a candidate for a degree, so even if you are not a candidate for a degree, but you're taking classes here at U of C, then you fall under the IRS definition of candidate for a degree. So that's probably going to apply to everybody in this room, that the tuition and fees are not reportable income. Certain fees, books, supplies, and equipment, which are required for courses. This one can kind of get a little sticky because if you take a class or if you enroll in, say, humanities, and humanities requires that you have a laptop, to be a humanities student, then that could be considered required. And obviously, you know, being a grad student, a computer is essential to your research and stuff like that, but that does not meet the IRS definition of what is required. Does everyone understand kind of the difference there? And to ask, is this required, is this not? It's kind of what your interpretation of that is, if it truly is required for your course, your degree, things like that. And it becomes an issue between you and the IRS. It's not anything that would, the university wouldn't be able to say, this is required, this is anything like that, provide memos or anything like that. So that's something to keep in mind, because we do get a lot of those kinds of questions. And then keep in mind that you could be receiving some kind of what we call a third-party scholarship, fellowship, which is someone from the outside. So if you receive something from an individual institution, something like that, that is also considered to be a taxable scholarship fellowship. Okay. Okay, so that's the first question. We've kind of identified the types of income and if it falls under one of those 4 categories. And if it does, the next question, of course, is do I have a filing requirement? And then for most people, this is what the IRS defines. So if you have just a small $1,000 scholarship and that's the only income that you had, you may not have a filing requirement because you're falling under the limit if you're a single individual. So make sure that you're determining the type of income that you have and you're adding up the amounts that you've received. And then you'll look to see if you have a filing requirement. So this is for most people, and then if you are a child or a dependent, these are the regulations for that, if you fall under that category. Okay? So now the next question, of course, is what tax form should I receive for the payments? A W-2 only reports wages and compensation payments. So scholarship fellowship would never be on a W-2 form. If you're not working, you're not going to get a W-2 form. The 1099 miscellaneous form reports the listed income. And I know a lot of people think that other income may be scholarship fellowship. It is not. A 1099 miscellaneous does not report scholarship fellowship. Scholarship fellowship is considered to be self-reported income by the IRS for U.S. citizens, permanent residents, and residents for tax purposes. You will not get a tax form with your scholarship fellowship on it. It's really important to understand. A 1042S, since everyone here is probably domestic, that's not really going to apply because this is a non-resident tax form. And you can see it does report scholarship fellowship, and that's because there's a withholding requirement. There's no withholding requirement for domestic students or for U.S. residents, permanent residents for tax, but for non-residents there is. We withhold 14% tax and have to send that to the IRS, report it to the IRS. So that's why they're getting a tax form. And then there's the 1098-T, which is a tuition statement. And then Mike's going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about the 1099 form. Go ahead.
Okay, the Bursar's office is responsible for mailing out 1098-Ts. Again, this is a form, tax form that came up about 8 years ago. That the form is to report qualified charges, and so institutions could report one of two things. They can report qualified charges, which is box 2, or qualified payments, which is box 1. You will only see box 2 filled out, and those are the qualified charges that we're reporting for that calendar year. So again, it's any activity that fell in that calendar year. So in this past January, the second week of January, we mailed out the 1090s for 2011, and if you had any activity in 2011, then you would be getting a 1090T if you're a domestic student. We do not generate a 1090T for foreign students, but if a foreign student wants a 1090 and asks us, we'll generate 1090T, but we're not required by federal law to generate a 1090T for foreign students. We do report in there any financial aid that is used to pay towards qualified tuition charges. So you'll see that in the box as well. One thing that I want to clear up is that we only report the financial aid that's used to pay qualified charges. Stipends are not used to pay qualified. Stipends never show up in your tuition bill and therefore are not reported on 1098-Ts. So sometimes students are pulling up 1098-Ts looking for their stipends on that. We do not report stipends. Stipends are not reported on 1099s, nor are they reported on 1098-Ts. I'm sure there's any other questions. I mean, again, I'll take questions at the end of the process on 1098-Ts. As I said, the 2011 have been out. We sent those out. You should have received your mailing. There's a website if you did not, again, a lot of times we may not have the correct address, so you may not get the paper 1098T, but you can go to the 1090-t.com website, and I urge you to go there because there's much more information on the website than there is in the paper documents we send out. You can drill down to the actual transaction level, so if you want to know what that dollar amount is in box 2, you can drill down on the website and see the actual transactions, dates, and everything else if you want to get that specific on what we're reporting on the 1098Ts. Now, the other thing that I do want to mention is that we do report the winter tuition for 2012 in 2011 because we assess tuition and financial aid is credited in December of 2011. And again, as I said earlier, we're reporting all the activity that hits your account in that calendar year. So if your registration is processed in December and your financial aid hits in December, then it will be reported on the 2012 1098T. Now, if you're restricted and register in January, then you'll see it on your 2012 1098T. So it's the dates of the actual transaction that drive what year we report that, and we can't change that. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. We were supposed to say at the end. We did ask for a question.
Yeah, do you want to take the questions at the end?
Yeah, I think we
Okay. All right. I'll stick around after the session if we don't have time to answer any questions. So I'll be more than happy to stick around and answer any questions about 1098Ts.
Okay, so the next thing is, what tax forms do I file? We get a lot of those kinds of questions. So we've identified the type of income, if we're going to get a form, if we have a filing requirement. So now, what form do I file is the next question. So the 1040 EZ is considered the easy form. So it's a very simple one-page form. So if you meet all of this criteria that's listed here, then you can file a 1040 EZ form. But for instance, if you have children, if you have dependents that you're claiming, you cannot use the 1040 EZ form. So the next form is then the 1040A, kind of the medium form. It's not as long as the 1040, but not as short as the 1040 EZ. So you have to meet all of that criteria if you want to file a 1040A form. And if one of those does not apply to you, then you're doing the 1040 form. That's everyone else. So if you can do the 1040 EZ form, that's going to be the easiest, shortest, 1040A, and then of course if you cannot fill out either one of those, you're doing the 1040 form. Okay? Okay. So how do I complete the tax forms? We can't give any kind of personal tax advice of where to put things and things like that. Advise you to read the instructions. Every line should have instructions in the 1040 or 1040A, 1040 EZ form. But this is just, I wanted to highlight about the scholarship income and how to report it on a 1040 form. The IRS says that you should, if you're using the 1040 EZ form, print SCH on, I think there's like a little dotted line before the box, because you want to make sure that you're not adding it in as some sort of wage, because you don't want to have to pay self-employment income on that scholarship fellowship, because that doesn't apply in this case. So make sure that you're following these rules. If you don't put the SCH, they're going to assume that it's some sort of wage, some kind of maybe self-reported income of a wage or independent contract nature. Okay?
It's going to be in the webpage.
Yes, yeah, I do want to reiterate, the presentation will be available just as you see it today on the website. So I'll give you that link one more time at the end. Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to talk about that. And then the next thing is how do I get help? If you just don't know what to do. We've listed a couple options for you. The first is the IRS free file. It's on the main IRS web page. And if you make under a certain income, then the IRS will allow you to use their free file options, the free electronic filing. And they actually list, if you go into it, and they'll list a bunch of maybe like 10 to 20 reputable software packages that they, I don't know if they endorse, but they have approved. So you can go ahead and pick any one of those would work, and then you can file and have a free file option. Again, that's just for federal. State filing, you will have to go to the Illinois Revenue Office to get those documents. There is a local IRS office. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to call the IRS, but you can kind of get lost in their automated system, and if you do get someone, it's not who you needed to answer your question. So there is a local IRS office on Dearborn, downtown in the Loop. They're open from 8:30 to 4:30. A lot of times they'll have a Saturday opening, but I wasn't able to find that on the web, so maybe they didn't do it this year. But you can keep checking back to the website there, or you can go down there. And then they're not going to be able to necessarily help you fill out the tax forms, but they're going to be able to be there to answer your questions and to give you advice and things like that. So that's definitely the best option if you need to get a hold of the IRS. The Illinois State Revenue Office is located in the Thompson Center. I've called them numerous times, and the best time to call is the morning. I've also had good luck getting through, but they also can kind of get routed later in the day. So if you go there, they're also very helpful if you have Illinois state tax questions. There's also what's called a VITA volunteer or a VITA volunteer. Those people are kind of certified by the IRS. Anyone can become a VITA volunteer, and then they just, they're usually at like libraries and things like that, and they will help you file your tax return for free. Just keep in mind that they usually generally work for people without complicated tax situations. So if you're just a student and you just have scholarship income, the VITA volunteer may be able to help you. But if you have you know, rents and incomes and overseas incomes and things like that, that may be beyond what a volunteer would be able to help you with. But if you just go to that website or call, they'll be able to give you a local location for that. And then there's different types of tax preparers. There's a certified public accountant that should be able to help you, and then they have a website that I've listed that you could find one. There's enrolled agents. They're not certified public accountants, but they are people who have been trained by the IRS to assist you in tax filing. So they're going to be much more accessible and helpful maybe than a CPA, but if you have a complicated tax situation, a CPA may be the best route. And then there's also national tax prep chains. I'm sure everyone's heard of them, H&R Block, Jackson Hewitt, those kinds of things. They're readily available. If you have a simple return, that may be the best option, but make sure that they're filing correctly for you. We don't endorse one place or the other or anything like that. It's just make sure that they understand your situation and that they are properly filing the taxes for you. Okay? And the next one, the IRS gives some tips on how to choose what is the best fit for you, whether a CPA enrolled agent or just a kind of a tax prep change, or even doing it yourself. And then make sure you're asking the right questions about, if you go to a H&R Block, make sure that you're asking these questions. Have they filed a student tax return before? You know, what are their credentials? How long have they been doing this? That kind of thing. There's just some good tips to make sure that you're getting the best service for your money. To make sure you also get how much they're going to cost you up front, because sometimes it can vary anywhere between maybe $50 to $75 up to $500 to $600. So make sure that you understand that before you give them your information. Okay, and then kind of finally, the main thing is this is new, so we're kind of coming in on the end of the tax season. We have to file by April 17th, but for next year we had some information that could better prepare you for filing the taxes. The one thing is, make sure that you're keeping track of your scholarship fellowship. A lot of times you maybe didn't know that it was reportable, so you just got rid of your pay stubs. You just don't know how much you've gotten, things like that. You have to do better record keeping, because ultimately you were the only one responsible for knowing how much money, how much information or reporting is required for you. The university may not have, it's not housed in one certain spot. We may have a little bit of some maybe travel payments. Mike sees a little bit of what hits your account. Maybe in some instances you get third party. There's nowhere that has all of the information. Maybe your department or your division may have the most complete, but ultimately it's your responsibility to make sure that you keep accurate records for your personal tax filing. Make sure you're noting the types of payments that you're getting so you know which tax forms to expect at year end. And then also, if you have those required things, the required books, fees, equipment, make sure you're keeping receipts of that. So you have that for reconciling your tax return at year end. And then what's really important is making the estimated tax payments. A lot of individuals don't know that they're supposed to do this. So if you're receiving scholarship fellowship throughout the year, the IRS says, I think it's around $1,000, I think I have it listed here, if you're going to owe more than $1,000, you have to make estimated tax payments. And for Illinois State, it's $500. If you're going to owe more than that for the calendar year, you should be making estimated quarterly tax payments. I have not seen it yet with the federal, but for Illinois State, I had many individuals pay in full by the due date, but they were penalized because they didn't pay the quarterly tax. So they are kind of cracking down on that. So even if you want to just wait and pay at year end, they're not really allowing you to do that. So this is the requirement. So if you make under $1,000, or if you're going to owe less than $1,000 for federal, you don't have that requirement. But make sure that you understand what your requirement is for the year, and making those estimated tax payments is required to do so. Okay? So I think now we're going to go ahead and take any questions.
Question in the back with 1090Ts.
Yeah, I was just wondering about whether or not this is part of what we are supposed to be including in our estimation of scholarships, since we are supposed to do some sort of tuition and fee deductions, and this is tuition. Do I say I make $45,000 a year and then try and subtract for tuition, or do I only say my scholarship is for my stipend amount, which I'm keeping track of?
The 1090 was intended to help support if you're taking the Hope credit or the Lifetime Learning Tax credit. Again, if you're trying to use a 1090 to support whether your financial aid is taxable, again, you're only going to see part of your financial aid in 1090. Again, the stipend's not going to be part of it. Again, Angie probably can give you better advice as to, because you're asking, how do I get all the information?
No, how do I report it? What am I reporting it as scholarship income?
Mike, I can answer.
You can tell the difference between, like, I'm a fully funded PhD and I got the 1098T that says all this extra money been paid, and then I have a stipend on top of that.
Yeah.
So like I have money that's more than what it costs to come here.
Okay.
On our 1098T, but then we also, so how are we reporting?
Okay, so if I understand your question correctly, tuition and fees is not a reportable amount. So if you have, let's say, $20,000 in tuition and fees that you're not really seeing, like you said, but you're getting a $10,000 stipend, you're only reporting $10,000. When they say you have this tuition required fees deduction, that's it for individuals that say you had a third-party scholarship, that they gave you $30,000 and gave it directly to you. Then you take and subtract the $20,000 out of that and left with $10,000 taxable income. When it's paid directly to the university or paid tuition and fees on your behalf, it's not reportable in any sense. You're just reporting the access or the stipend amount. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
That's also why we're not eligible for the Hope education.
I don't know what the rules are for the Hope education
The Hope
credit.
and the Lifetime Learning Tax credit and the Hope Scholarship is for the payments that you make towards qualified charges. If your qualified charges is fully funded, then you're not making any payments against it. So it wasn't intended to determine taxable income for your gifts and scholarships. It was intended to, as a tax, to be able to so you have the information to take the tax credit if you qualify. So if you're paying your full tuition and you're not getting financial aid, that payment you're making, you can take you can get a tax break on that. So that is really the purpose of the 1098T, is to give you that information that you can take the tax credit.
On a related note, we report separately stipend that comes to us as scholarship versus stipend that's wages from TAing or being an instructor, right?
Yes. Well, you don't. You.
Do you mind repeating the question just for the purpose of
Okay. So the question was, you report separately the scholarship and then the W-2 earnings. Is that?
So altogether, let's say you're somebody like me who's supposed to get $21,000 a year, but they are deducting $6,000 of that, and they intend to have me work as a TA 2 quarters, which will then provide me with $6,000 in wages. So my total is still $21,000, but $15,000 of that is a stipend that I don't directly work for, and $6,000 of that is my wages earned from teaching of some sort.
No. Okay.
Those are reported on separate lines and separate types of income, right?
That's right. You'll get a W-2 for teaching, if you work as a research assistant, any work, and that will have already had taxes withheld from it. But the stipend that you receive, you need to report as in one of the ways that Angie had showed earlier, with that it's self-reported. So those will show, you'll put them in as separate line items in your tax forms.
Question in the back. I think you're a lady back, way in the back. Your hand up first.
You had said that winter 2012 tuition is reported as 2011.
It's reported in the year that we assess tuition. 95% of the students have the tuition assessed in December. The process starts in December and that's when the financial aid hits so that we can have refunds ready for students who do get refunds.
Yeah, so my question is, do we also report our winter 2012 stipend as 2011 income?
The stipends, no, that's a different, again, this is for purposes of taking the tax credit. The stipends are reported in 2012, I believe, and not in 2011. Those aren't dispersed until, again, it's the time to, gift aid is dispersed in December because it's paying your tuition in December.
But the stipends are also dispersed in December.
The stipends are meant to be released to students at the start of winter quarter. So even though the check may have been run technically in December, a student isn't eligible to pick it up until the first day of winter quarter.
Not 2011 income.
It's,
No, it's
Yes,
the
it's
date of the check.
yeah.
I think I have a different question. What should we do with the 1098 forms if we don't actually, like, if it's all of our tuition is paid directly to the university?
You don't need the
Nothing.
first of all, you don't need the 1090 to report anyways. It's there for your benefit but if you're fully funded, then you don't really need the 1098T because you're not going to be taking the tax deduction. You don't need that then.
The 1098T is really, in most cases, will only be useful to a student who is not receiving tuition or fee aid. So a master's student,
Or a professional student.
professional school student.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how long shall we keep the records? How long shall we keep the things on record?
7 years.
I think you left.
That's the audit rule for the IRS, 7 years.
Right.
How do we know whether we're a non-state student? We need to file our state taxes in Illinois or state of we haven't claimed
The Illinois state has, I think in the first part they have like, do I need to file, and they have a instructions of who needs to file, and they have a line for students, and it explains if you need to file or not. So if you obviously are, if you have that TA like the other lady had or anything working of any sort in Illinois, of course you may have an Illinois state tax filing. But if you're just receiving scholarship stipend, you make sure you read that what they define as a student and who needs to file the Illinois state tax return.
And on the grad financing website, there are several links that will take you right into the IRS website where they talk about scholarship income. They'll take you right into the Illinois state filing, which you can do for free as an Illinois resident and as a student for your state taxes in Illinois. So those links will take you right there, and it's https://gradfinancing.uchicago.edu.
Young lady.
So just going back to the TA wages and all that, earlier you had mentioned that we should put scholarship or stipend information on line 1 of the 1098 form. And by doing like scholarship, I'll do that. But isn't that also line 1?
Yes, it is. And so I think if you're using some sort of tax software, maybe a TurboTax or something like that, they ask separate questions about that. But if you're filling the form out yourself, in her case, it's still going to say 21,000 in that category, but in the dotted line, you may put SCH 15,000. Yes.
John, right.
I have a few questions. The first is, if a student is compensated for a year's health insurance, is that classified as affordable? And the second one is, if a person anticipates an Illinois tax liability, how do you go about paying those quarterly tax payments, to avoid the penalty?
The first question about the health insurance, it's kind of a sticky question because they require you to have health insurance, I believe, but you can opt out of the university health insurance if you have your own. So is it required to have the university insurance? Technically, no, because you can opt out of it. Isn't that the determination there? What was the second question?
You said that a person who takes penalties for Illinois that anticipate a liability and exceed a certain amount, and they weren't paying
Oh, there's, for federal, it's a 1040 ES form, and then for Illinois State, it's an IL 1040 ES form. And then it gives you a little worksheet that tells you, answer all the questions, and it tells you this is, okay, you're gonna have a liability here, because you can estimate the scholarship amount, estimate your wages, estimate how much you think is gonna be withheld, and then it'll tell you how much you owe, and then you can divide it up between the 4 quarters. Or you can pay it all up in the first quarter. You can't, you shouldn't back pay, but if you wanted to pay, if you owed $1,000, you could pay the full $1,000 in one time before the due date, or you can divide it up between the 4. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, okay, for the health insurance, quickly, just so I have it right. Because you can opt out, it's not classified as required, therefore it is reportable. Is that correct?
Yes, but you can look in the IRS determination, because it does address health insurance specifically in IRS publication 970. So you can also make your own determination there.
I don't know if this is a rumor or not, but I was under the impression if you're on some types of training grants that come from the government, that was not taxable income, and I just wanted to know if that is correct, or maybe it's specific for each grant, and if so, how can I find that?
It would be considered a business expense, so as opposed to you getting personal gain out of it. If that makes sense. It's an IRS determination, so I'm keeping it as it is.
Just to go back to the health insurance thing for a second, if we decide that health insurance is not required and we should be reporting it, does that go in along with the stipend as something that would be winter quarter would be 2012, or would that be along with the tuition, something on part of 2011?
Well, it's a fee, so whenever the fee was assessed. So it sounds like whenever the rest of the tuition and fees was assessed, so it would be 2013.
Follow up with that, because my 1098 actually reports more than whatever is assessed in tuition and fees, but it's on the 1098, so I'm being slammed for that. But since I think it's health insurance that's putting that over, I don't know if other people are facing that.
You wouldn't have to report for the health insurance, but if you are buying the supplemental dental or vision, then you're paying for that, not the
Right.
the tuition remission that you get.
Well, what happens is like the school pays for the basic, but however it's being reported,
You don't need to worry about
and
it.
laid out. So, because you were saying don't worry about the 1098T, but I put it in my federal tax, and it's like, you have too much money, you don't qualify for, whatever the things that I'm qualified, PTSD because you got, or no, the lifetime earning credit because, whatever thing it was, and it was like, well, I didn't ask for more money, and I certainly didn't get a check for more money, so what is,
So I think we said earlier, we don't need to do 1098T on our.
yeah,
taxes.
take
Yes,
it off, even though it's over, but.
And you won't get the ETIC, you won't get the credit.
Okay.
You also won't consider income. Yeah.
It's a tool that we provide. Again, we're required to submit 1090Ts, and again, that's the reason we drill down to the activities, so you know what transactions are reported in each box. So you can go down on the website and see the actual transactions. So again, if the student life fees are part of qualified, and the definition for qualified charges for 1090Ts may not be the same definition that the IRS uses elsewhere. So again, you have to be careful, because it's when the tax laws were written to create the 1090Ts, they have one set of regulations, and that might not be the same for stipends or others. So again, I caution you on that.
Are student loans taxable, or how does that work for student loans?
Just, again, on the 1090T, student loans are considered payments on behalf of the student. So we treat them as payments. There's, again, there's no taxable issue, but when you look at 1090 and you look at the payment bucket and you drill down, if you have loans, that's where you're going to see the loans. So we treat it for 1090 purposes as a payment made by the student.
Okay.
For participation in research grants, would these fall into the scholarship and fellowship category if those monies are specifically for research costs rather than for stipend? And so in other words, would I just take that chunk of money and it goes into the income category, and then I just deduct whatever, that those monies that I then directed to research costs. Does that make sense?
I think he's talking about, you're talking about a research stipend, right? You get a stipend check that you then use as a research grant?
Federal research grant, so it's different than the earlier question.
They want
a specific dissertation research grant.
And are the amounts within the grant earmarked for travel, research, insurance?
Here's the definition for stipends, in order for you to know whether it's a reportable or non-reportable.
You have to speak up a little louder for them.
Okay. In order for you to know what the determination between reportable stipend and non-reportable stipend, go to publication 970. But for your research grant, there's some clause on the publication 970 that if it's going towards your education purposes, then that's reportable as income for you. But if it's beneficiary for the University of Chicago, because some professor wants you to go somewhere and research for him in behalf for the faculty, then that's not reportable for you. But if it's just for your plain and simple for your benefit, then that's reportable income.
As a follow-up to that question, if you have a State Department language grant or something like that, would that fall under being beneficiary to the government? I mean, is that also not your personal responsibility?
I think she's talking about a class.
Class
Yeah.
I'm not sure what kind of grants, are those different? Summer research,
Oh, the summer research.
critical languages that are
Yeah, that's considered reportable income for you, because there's one clause too that if you're not giving it to the whole University of Chicago community, for the whole class itself, it's just selected students that are receiving for it, then you have to consider that reportable income for you. That is why all summer research grants, it's considered as reportable income, because it's just selected students who are receiving this grant.
So for instance, just how to make it simple is if a professor gave everyone in the class a book, then it's not reportable income. But if he only gave 5 or 6 students a book, then actually that book is considered to be reportable income, the value of that book. So it's kind of the same thing. So if the class, I guess summer research is only given to a handful of students, then that's considered to be taxable income because it's not everybody. It's kind of the same principle.
I'm sorry that I missed the very beginning, but so my understanding is that there's really no difference between fellowships, stipends, awards, and grants, and that there's one in general should we be filling out a separate deductibles sheet, or just in general are grad students taking this $3,700 or $700 deductible for being an independent human being? I mean, it seems like unless we can come up with more than $3,700 I don't know what, but there's no reason for us to file any other deductible income.
I think the $3,700 you're talking about is a personal exemption amount, and that doesn't have anything to do with the deductions. There's what's called a standard deduction. I think that's maybe $5,700 to $5,900. It kind of changes every year. If you are not going to have enough deductions to go over that, then yes, of course you would take the standard deduction.
And the deductions that we would, can you give me an idea of what deductions we would be otherwise listing?
They're listed in IRS publication 970. So if it's a required item for your course or your class, then that could possibly be deducted. We can't give specific tax advice. So anything that you determine to be required for your course, your study, can be deducted.
And I think there's no way to say ahead of time most graduate students take a standard deduction. I think most people in the U.S. probably do a standard deduction, right? But any individual may very well have more than 7% of their income that they paid out in health needs, right? And so they are able then to count that towards deductions. Somebody might be paying, so it's really going to be an individual will have to determine whether they have enough deductions to be more than a standard deduction.
Any more questions?
So if you're a math student, what do you do to the math 1098?
If an MA student is paying their own tuition, then they may qualify for a lifetime learning credit where they get a credit in their taxes for up to a certain amount of their tuition paid. It's not a lot, actually, given the amount of tuition paid. But if your tuition is paid for, you're just not going to qualify for this credit. It's really for those students
Or out of pocket,
who are paying tuition.
or taking loans to pay their tuition.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose of the original purpose of 1098T.
But the university is required to send it to all students, so everybody gets one of this form, whether or not it's useful to you.
What's that?
All domestic students.
All domestic
Yes,
students.
domestic
get it.
student.
I'm an international student
Mhm.
who shifted, because I've been living, I don't know, a number of years, to this domestic. So I'm in this funny situation where I'm both international and domestic.
So how you file your taxes is based on your tax residence.
Yes.
So U.S. permanent residents are residents for tax purposes. So if you're someone that used to be a non-resident and has changed because you've been in the U.S. long enough to a resident for tax purposes, you can request a 1098T. Just the way the system is set up, it only sends to domestic students. But Mike said that international students, there's no way for the Bursar's office to determine if an individual has gone from non-resident to resident. So in your case, you're a resident for tax purposes, you can request one from
And
the
we'll
Bursar's
be more happy to
office.
provide it. Again, we generate that every 2 weeks, so it could take up to 2 weeks for us to get it. So don't wait till April 15th if you want that document, because,
And how do I
just call the Bursar's office and tell them that you're a national student, that you did not receive a 1098T, and that you'd like that one generated on your behalf.
Is there one more
You-
question in the back?
Or you can email the Bursar's office. You go to our website, gives us the phone number and email address. So.
I just want to know what is the website where we can find this presentation?
Yeah, just one more time, it's on grad financing, so that's GRAD financing, financing.uchicago.edu. I think we also have a quick link from the grad student affairs site, so if you have trouble finding it, but it's gradfinancing.uchicago.edu. And the the IRS links to relevant like scholarship / award / stipend information are right there too. So it might be helpful for you to just go there, yeah.
We got this weird form this year that I don't think I've ever gotten before, and I don't know what it is. It's a 1099G.
It's from Illinois State, and it pertains to your state refund from the year before. So you are required to put that on your 2011 tax return. You're welcome.
But only if they filed itemized. If they didn't itemize,
Oh.
if they didn't itemize their state as is that correct?
I'm not sure on that.
That may be potentially an income source for you
Yes.
this year, the fact that you got a refund from the state this year.
Yeah,
So it might be a
that's what
potential. That's what they're giving it, say, we gave you some money back this year, and if you claimed it as a deduction last year, and you got the tax benefit from it, then you might have to report it this year.
So getting a refund from the year before is now income for
Well,
this year.
Again, that's the state.
I think that,
Yeah,
the Illinois Revenue website has details on the 1099G. Is that what it is?
The grad affairs
Pardon me?
website? The grad affairs?
No, the Illinois Revenue Office. And you can just Google Illinois Revenue Office and it pops up and has information on the 1099G. Is that all? No more
Clear
questions?
as mud?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we've learned that the 1098T is there pretty much to confuse you. No, this is not a very clean process, and I really appreciate everybody taking a stab at this. I think that a lot more of the information will be to be clear when you take a look at those IRS links and the forms as you're filling them out.
And it may be useful to, we're not CPAs up here. We each have a different position at the university that interacts with a part of money that you get. And we all struggle with taxes as individuals, just as you're doing this as students. So we're trying to put together a little bit of different pieces of knowledge that will hopefully help you get started with your process, right?
I'm sorry, I have one last question. I got a form for what I think is the wages I earned as a TA, and it was not a W-2, it was a 1099 miscellaneous, but that's still wages?
Yes.
How is that different? Why did I get a 1099?
Oh, what box it belongs to?
I'm sorry, what?
What box it belongs to? Because in 1099, there's different boxes, and that's how you report your income. For example, it belongs to box 7 for non-employee compensation. That means you receive some service, you perform some service, or if it's on box 3, it's other income. That means somebody gave you some award or prizes. So really, you have to know what type of boxes your money went to.
So probably you need to match the form against some information on the IRS website to figure out what it was for. And I just want to mention also for anyone who is getting W-2s or who gets a paycheck in some way from the university working at the library as a research assistant, there is a site called the Employee Self-Service site, ess.uchicago.edu. You can go, a lot of students aren't aware of this, but you can get a copy of your W-2 there. You can look at your pay stubs. Stipends won't be on here, but other kinds of income that you're getting at the university are on this site. We as employees use it, and you should feel free to look up your information there as well.
And if you're getting a salary, then you're treated as an employee for that purposes. So again, you have the same access to that as any other employee.
And if, as a student, you have some confusion about, I think I got this much in stipend income last year, but maybe I had some travel money too, and I can't quite remember, and I didn't keep very good records, do go see your Dean of Students office, because we'll have this information, and we can help you clarify your records.
Okay, April 17th is the day. Good luck.